Hello, my name is Danny Evans. I'm the CEO and founder of Millennium Envoys. Our third episode of Decoding Globalization will focus on intercultural intersection and iconic travel. So today we have a 2-for-1 special with my man here today, Japanese Journeyman, Desmon Hickson. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey man, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh man, that's great. So, I always start with this first question. Who is Desmon Hickson, personally and professionally?
I would say personally, the biggest thing for me is my faith, like God, and that's right now, especially the most important thing. I would say family is really where I'm at these days. Professionally, right now, I do work for a company that's called Brand USA, where that's my day job, where I support promoting travel to the United States, specifically from Asia Pacific, so Japan included. But in my spare time, it's something I'm passionate about. It's Japanese, like you mentioned. I grew up speaking Japanese and the whole nine. Started a YouTube channel, Desi D's Dojo, content creation and about travel to Japan and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's my baby right now, and that's kind of the main project I'm working on the side.
Let's start when you was a baby in terms of like learning about it. So how did your Japanese journey start?
Yeah, I know I mentioned a little bit about travel to Japan, but I grew up speaking Japanese, and so that's kind of interesting for somebody that lives in Baltimore and looks the way that I do. I get a lot of, big eyes, When I was a kid, my older brother, he had a friend. He bought my brother a PlayStation game home one day.
Wow.
Dragon Ball, back in the day.
Yo, that's big.
Dragon Ball was the jam.
Still to this day.
Right. And so I remember us playing the game. We had to find a way to hook up the PlayStation so we could play it, and that was really my first time hearing Japanese. And I was like, "Yo, what is this? This hit a little different than on Toonami." You know what I'm saying? So I started getting interested there, and there was a program at one of the local middle schools at Suburb Magnet. They had a magnet program where you could study the language. And the program had you study for 3 years, and then at the end of your 8th grade year, the following summer, you could go to the country where the language you studied was spoken. So I got to go. My parents saved the money. Shout out to my parents. Love y'all. The first impression that I really remember that is kind of stuck with me to this day is people are people. At the end of the day, there's people on the same earth, on a different side of the planet, who are doing some of the same things, have the same hopes, same fears. I'm not just saying that to be sounding poetic, but no, I remember getting on the bus and thinking man, this is going through that experience. It just always kind of taught me to have an open mind to certain things and understand that while you might not agree with something necessarily, you can still have respect for people. And I think that carried me a long way.
Another thing of what I realized in Japan is very difficult to develop a relationship with the Japanese people. It really does take some time.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's difficult to develop long-lasting relationships with the Japanese people? And if you find yourself experiencing that, how can you cultivate it? How can you initiate that process?
Here in the U.S., pretty quickly you start sharing personal information. If you hit it off, you might be like, "Oh yeah, my mom's is sick, and this and this, and this is what's been going on. This is how I grew up." In Japan, it's not like that. They're even words, honne and tatemae, which are basically your true self, and then kind of the character you play in society. And so it takes a lot of time and energy to put into learning and getting to know a person. Typically, before, and it's not everybody, right? But before you get to that home there, what that person is really thinking and what they really feel. And even then, it might not express itself in the same way that you used to. And that's something that you have to be willing to put time into. And if you don't, then you can feel like your relationships are pretty surfacey, that people don't get me. Maybe Japanese people aren't as open as people say or whatever. And while some of that could be true, it's a lot of, it's just different. You know what I mean? It's different.
And one thing that I personally do is to start off the relationship with someone is to bring a small gift, some small gifts from America, and give it to people who have been very generous to me, or helpful. In my eyes, I think it's very important to get that first-hand experience.
Right. Like, do you eat hamburgers every day, hot dogs?
Nah.
You know what I'm saying? So the reason I ask that question is because it's funny you say that. Is I just encourage people to meet actual people, because you'll get the idea that everybody in Japan likes anime, everybody likes manga, like, and while it is a pretty large like gateway into the culture, and so it's your window into the culture. But I say, yeah, just get to meet people, talk to people. You find all, like, just like here in the U.S., you find all different varieties of people who have different hobbies, different interests, not just, you know, what you see online.
You know, basically all the ins and outs of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody always focus on Tokyo. Tokyo is overcrowded with foreigners.
Yeah.
And I think it's crucial, even for myself, because I haven't been outside of Tokyo too much.
Right.
To experience what's out there in Japan.
Yeah.
So, like, what is the unkept secret destination spots in Japan that people need to explore, do you think? You having like any suggestions about that?
Any specific cities?
Or something that was memorable for you?
Yeah, you're right. Tokyo is overcrowded, Kyoto's overcrowded. Even places like Kanazawa are starting to see so many tourists, and I think they're even trying to pass some laws around, like, how, you know,
Mount Fuji?
Mount Fuji. Yeah, right. So I would say the whole Tohoku region. So Tohoku is like northeast of Tokyo, and so that was affected by like the Fukushima disaster, like 3/11, the earthquake and tsunami. But it's, you know, it's really beautiful. There's even a couple channels where people have taken drives up. I sent a guy on an itinerary with his girlfriend, where they drove up to this mountain cafe, and you know what I mean? It was like literally, I think, on the top of a mountain, kind of overlooked, with some traditional Japanese food, and there's different shrines and temples and stuff that a lot of people haven't really gone to. And so all of Tohoku is nice. I had a friend who stayed in Beppu, which is like southwest Japan. It's like known for its hot springs, and she was telling me about this really dope bread shop that was there. She would get up super early. She was doing like a house share kind of thing. My homeboy Kenzo, shout out to Kenzo, check out his art. Kenzo lives in a place called Minami Ashigara, and they have one of the most beautiful temples I've ever seen. Like, there's some beautiful temples in Kyoto and so on and so forth, but it's the beautiful thing about it is there's not a lot of people. So when you go, I'm not going to tell you the name of the temple because I don't want a lot of people to necessarily, you can look it up, but but yeah, just being able to be kind of surrounded and kind of feel like the vibe of, I guess, that the trees and all that kind of stuff. It's like you don't necessarily get that when you go to, like, even though Kiyomizu-dera is one of my favorite temples, with, you know, hundreds of thousands of people there, you don't necessarily get that same feel. So those are a few.
I know people are like wondering, especially like first time travelers, on how they can like prepare, you know, for those types of trips, because it can be difficult putting together like an itinerary going to Japan if you never really experienced the culture or ever been there before. You have two different types of travelers, right? Like in my experience, kind of sending people. You have people who want to go, kind of check it off their bucket list, and hey, I've been to Japan. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, I get that. And so for those kind of folks, I would say basic phrases are just going to go a long way. Like you were talking about, I feel like in Asia in general, people are very appreciative of effort. Like when you try to do something and kind of put yourself out there. So you being able to say, you know, something basic, konnichiwa, you saying, you know, thank you, that sort of thing. Like, even in a place where people don't speak a ton of English, like, that's still going to get you further than probably you think. And that bow.
Make sure you hit that bow, right?
Bow one, but you gotta do at least 2 or 3.
And so I say for that type of traveler, going that's been studying some Japanese, I would just say don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, that's the way language works. Because you made a mistake and use the Japanese you actually studied in the book, and you'll find that some of that stuff don't, you know, it's like any other language people don't use, but
that's true. Millennium Envoys, we are planning to do some study abroad and travel trips to Japan in the future next year. So that's the plan. For you, like, what is your biggest moment or like takeaway that you want to share with the audience before we go today?
Yeah. I'm giving it away a little bit because it's in one of my YouTube videos, but
Give them a sneak peek.
yeah, for the sake of it, I would say honestly the thing I'm the most proud of is my relationship with my family in Japan. Like, the reason being because I think when I first went, obviously I didn't have any expectation of like what, I don't know what this is going to be like, you know what I mean? Like, I was a young boy, as they say in Philly, watching even though I'm from Baltimore, watching Naruto and stuff like that, and I'm thinking it's going to be like that. I speak from experience when I say, like, you can't assume a culture is going to be like what you see on TV or whatever. I think about the moments where I felt like, man, I don't know, do they really like me? You know what I mean? Different confrontations that we might have had, like feeling a bit lonely, not really being able to speak the language at a certain point, to where our relationship is now, where when I got married, they came to my wedding, and when their youngest daughter got married right before COVID, we went to their wedding. You know what I'm saying? Like, now both my sisters have kids. I have a child, and like I said earlier, another one on the way. And
Are you gonna teach your kids Japanese?
I'm trying to tell them to. I gotta teach them English too, but that's fine.
All of you like thinking about studying abroad in Japan or China, wherever it may be, I think it's important to maybe try to have like a homestay.
Yeah.
I think that will be one of the greatest experiences you can ever have.
Yeah.
Being in a country, studying or living, whatever you're trying to do. But with that being said, I want to thank you again for joining us here for episode 3 of Decoding Globalization. There's more to come. Check his page out. What is it again?
Desi D's Dojo.
And you will see the link in the description below. So I'll make sure I share that with everyone. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.